Oswell E. Spencer, a name that is shrouded in mystery in the Resident Evil timeline, with the countless major events happening due to his influence in the shadows, always brooding in the background, but yet his influence is felt throughout this series. So the question should be asked, who exactly is he? How is he so influential in the full grand scheme of the story in Resident Evil, and what factors did he commit to garner such power? Well, in this video, we'll delve into his past, the many documents that shed light into this mysterious figure, as we cover the very first episode of Explaining Evil, highlighting the Umbrella co-founder, Oswell E. Spencer.
I was to become a god, creating a new world with an advanced race of human beings.
Well, to begin, we have to have a short summary of what happened throughout the RE franchise to give us a good perspective of how much damage he's caused in the general timeline. Well, to start off, ranging from Resident Evil 0 and all the way to Resident Evil Village, he was always mentioned in the background or somehow given a very small amount of screen time, with most of his background lore explained through the countless files, documents, and diaries that we read throughout the series. Well, as far as we know, from the start of the T-virus outbreak in the late 1990s in the Arklay Mountains and Raccoon City, to the countless world infections due to the new variants of the Progenitor virus, to Resident Evil 6 and the scattered campaign explaining the outbreak of the newly developed C-virus, and from what we saw in Resident Evil Village, which we know that Oswell had some connection to the main antagonist in that game, Mother Miranda. It just truly shows how much influence that Spencer had in all these games. And to better explain and supplement this, we have to go all the way back to his past, his mindset and goals for the future, and the end result from all of his work. This should give us enough evidence on why Spencer was such an evil individual. But moving back in time, and as far as we know, we will be jumping from many Resident Evil games since they don't follow a direct step-by-step timeline explanation to his background. Because the earliest timeline we knew of Spencer was that he came from a very wealthy and prestigious line of the Spencer family, having prominence in Europe and networks with other aristocracies in the region, hence his friendship with Edward Ashford and the Ashford family, which, if you guys didn't know, was also part of nobility and prominence. And Edward would also serve as a co-founder of Umbrella later on with Spencer. But before that, going back to Spencer, sometime in his early adulthood, we knew he would become a medical student, then venture into a remote area of Romania. Here, he would have his connection with Mother Miranda in RE Village. The evidence with this was with the photos of him during his tenure in the area, but also his note to Mother Miranda, which hinted at the early discovery of the Progenitor virus in Africa, which read, "Dear Miranda, my deepest apologies for not meeting you in person. I would love nothing more than to visit your quaint village once more. However, I am incredibly busy. Then again, I suppose for an immortal woman such as yourself, you no longer remember this poor, half-dead medical student in the snow. I have always cherished the revelation I came to 15 years ago when I stayed in your village. I was inspired by your research to think one could transform a human by infecting them with an organism. Positively visionary. I knew with that knowledge, I could achieve my own vision for the next step in human evolution. Even after 2 world wars, and humanity on the cusp of another, my conviction never wavered. I realized, however, through the many nights of intellectual talks you and I shared, that your conviction differed from mine. You hoped to bring back a single dead person, while I aimed to change the world. Your experiments on the mold would not have aided me on my endeavor to achieve an exponential infection. I thought a virus would be more effective. This is why, my dear, I had to leave you. I still regret never telling you goodbye. My apologies for reminiscing. I actually have news that I thought might please you. I have found the key to evolution, the Progenitor, a virus found in Africa. I plan to start a company with friends and colleagues dedicated to the virus research. I will call it Umbrella, just like the symbol in the cave that we spoke about. I am one step closer to making my vision a reality. I hope you'll be able to achieve your goal someday too. You taught me so much, and for that, I will be forever in your debt. Sincerely, your lifelong student, Oswell E. Spencer. This of course was a spark to Spencer, because prior to his discovery of this virus, it was Mother Miranda's influence and mentoring of the young Spencer that helped him envision his future goal of eugenics, which means that he foresaw a future of a superior breed of human beings, with him at the helm of said population, though unlike Mother Miranda, who only sought to bring back her deceased daughter back to life using the Megamycete under the village. Spencer thought otherwise and decided to deviate from using the strain that Mother Miranda already had at hand. Instead, he wanted to use a virus as a catalyst due to its many applications, which the discovery of the Progenitor virus in Africa became such a significant finding for the young Spencer. This results in his eventual departure from the village and his mentor Mother Miranda, though the goal he wanted to achieve due to her mentorship and the lasting impression he took from one of the symbols in the village would be world-renowned in the future timeline. Because it was during this time we find out that after the discovery of the Progenitor virus, Spencer decided to create a company of his own, which required mass funding and was also used as a deliberate cover-up for the new virus he and his colleagues discovered. So, a symbol that Spencer saw in the village, which would be this, would be the logo for his new company, naming it Umbrella, which at that time, the creation of Umbrella was with his friends and colleagues, which we already mentioned earlier was with his childhood friend Edward Ashford, and another brilliant colleague of his, James Marcus. So with the three at the helm of this newly formed company, the foundation of the cover-up of the Progenitor virus would be the pharmaceutical sector, leading the world to believe that Spencer and his cronies were there to create new medicine for the general population, though some sectors of the company would also dabble into military-based experimentations and creations, which all this was for the sole purpose of gaining financial security for the long term, having government funding this corporation, though beneath all that was the secret research into the Progenitor virus, because with the funding already secured, it was only a matter of time until Spencer or one of his researchers would find the next step into the Progenitor virus, though as we know, Spencer's goal of eugenics was still his vision for the future. Well, years would pass, Umbrella still thriving, and the constant research into the Progenitor virus at hand, the eugenics program that Spencer wanted to happen began its roots, which the collaboration he had with a man named Dr. Wesker would set this project, in the end naming it Project Wesker. With the eugenics goal that Spencer wanted being the main result from this experiment, the project would need many candidates to achieve this goal, with Spencer gathering many children for this measure, either through legal or illegal means, and usually the children would come from parents who had at least an above average IQ, resulting in many child candidates for Project Wesker, and as we know, the end result from this project was the lasting 13 candidates, with both Albert Wesker and Alex Wesker being the last survivors of this experiment, due to the rigors of grooming and use of an experimental dose of the Progenitor virus on all 13 candidates. And as far as we know, Albert Wesker became this in Resident Evil 5 as a result. Alex Wesker, on the other hand, would continue her research into a variant strain of the T-virus and would be an essential part of Spencer's later years of life. But before that, this Project Wesker of Spencer wouldn't be as fruitful as Spencer wanted it to be, especially after the discovery of the T-virus by James Marcus, the other co-founder of Umbrella. This would set off a lot of evil plots in the background in Spencer's part, because as Umbrella continued to grow as a company, and its influence would become world-renowned, a rift between the three co-founders would be sparked, with each trying to find their footing on who would come out on top, with the only way to achieve complete control of Umbrella was by discovering an applicable means of using the Progenitor virus, with each co-founder trying to achieve this goal. Though as we know, Edward Ashford and James Marcus would almost achieve this power foothold in Umbrella, but through some circumstances due to Spencer, Edward would have a freak accident that would take his life, and James Marcus would end up like this. So effectively, this would leave Oswell E. Spencer as the sole founder and controller of Umbrella. He would then take over James Marcus's work on the T-virus, allowing William Birkin, yes, the same William Birkin that we saw in Resident Evil 2, and the G-virus creation he achieved, and the subsequent completion of Tyrants, a bioorganic weapons created from the result of cloning and using the T-virus as a catalyst, creating an intelligent life form with superhuman-like abilities, but programmable enough to be used for missions. Which actually is another incentive for Umbrella to continue into the T-virus research in order to sell these BOW products to the likes of the US government, gaining substantially more financial backing for the future endeavors for Umbrella. So with all this at hand, you would think that Spencer would finally achieve his goals of gaining enough financial cachets and the propagation of his Project Wesker vision, while as we know in the timeline, this would all crumble downhill for Spencer, because in the story of the early games between Resident Evil 0 to Resident Evil 3, Spencer's Umbrella research into the T-virus and the resulting monsters and zombies created due to this infection, and the Raccoon City STARS team would eventually discover this illegal activity of Umbrella and would attempt to let the general public know, well, this T-virus catastrophe would be in full view of the city within just a couple of months, with the eventual city needing to be eradicated from the map by the US government due to the lack of containment of the virus, which this would be a big blow to Umbrella, causing their stock to plummet due to this incident, leaving it in shambles without the infrastructure that Umbrella had in Raccoon City, especially after we knew that they had a couple of important secret underground facilities that was used into the T-virus research. So now, where would this place Spencer? Because after the destruction of Raccoon City after the events of Resident Evil 3, we don't really hear much more about him. Well, that is until Resident Evil 5, and here we get some actual screen time with this mysterious founder of Umbrella.
A new superior breed of humans, given birth by the Progenitor virus. The Wesker children were entrusted with endless potential. Of them, only one survived. You.
Are you saying I was manufactured?
I was to become a god. Creating a new world with an advanced race of human beings. However, all was lost with Raccoon City. Despite that setback, your creation still holds great significance. Now my candle burns dimly. Ironic, isn't it? For one who has the right to be a god. To face his own mortality.
The right to be a god. That right is now mine. The right to be a god. You. Arrogant even until the end. Only one truly capable of being a god deserves that right.
Though minimal, it finally gives us an insight of his life post the Raccoon City incident. So as mentioned, all was lost after the destruction of Raccoon City, as he laments about the vision of eugenics with Albert Wesker, one of the last surviving candidates from his eugenics program of Project Wesker. Well, as we know, he would lose his life to the very person who he envisioned the future human race should look like, though without hesitating to claim that he had the right to become a god. All these goals he once had, the vision of a superior race of human beings, his research into the Progenitor virus, and the slow decay of his physical body, it just shows that after all he's done, especially all the inhumane experiments that he's done to the many countless innocent people, he dies a sad death. But even with this event, one could wish we knew more about the final years of this man's life. Well, to our luck, his later years of his life would be expounded upon in the DLC of Lost in Nightmares, which it recounts his memoirs and the files that his butler had for the last member of the Spencer family, which can be read. I, Oswell E. Spencer, founder of Umbrella, as well as its chief executive officer, hereby proclaim myself as ruler of all mankind. Everyone shall prostrate themselves before me, as they once did for the ancient false gods. At least, that was what my destiny should have been. But I did not become a god. I could not sever my ties to my own weak humanity. Instead, my body is being destroyed by this damn disease, the disease of age. It has carved wrinkles on my face like a well-weathered canyon, and my arms are like the thin withered branches of a dying tree. Age has even deprived me of the use of my legs. The only chance I'll ever have of becoming a god and shaping humanity's destiny is to stop this disease from continuing to ravage my body. I believe there's a saying about realizing the joys of life when one is at death's doorstep. Sayings like these are for the weak who are going to die. They attempt to mask their fears with pithy aphorisms. Mortals can't comprehend what life means for those death is not a concern. The ignorant are fond of making generalizations to include those who would not be party to their pedantic musings. I will undo this unjust travesty done to me by time, and I will present myself as a perfect being that will rule over all mankind. I will give them a new set of commandments to govern their lives. All that remains is to find the key to eternal life. The virus manufactured by Umbrella is the key. It suppresses telomere shortening, which negates a function that limits cell division. Somewhere in that process is the key to immortality. If the process could be perfected, that key would be mine. I have the means available to me. I can realize my ambitions thanks to Alex. I lost much in human capital following Umbrella's bankruptcy, but I still have Alex, the best and brightest of them all, and the last of my children. I have faith that if anyone can find a cure for the ailment of time that keeps me from assuming my role as head of mankind, it's Alex. Alex will find a way. So after reading the first Spencer memoir, we can see the many key points that were still ingrained in Spencer, which was his goal of becoming a god, the use of the Progenitor virus as a means to achieve his eugenics goal, and the realization of the bankruptcy of Umbrella due to the Raccoon City incident, and now the mention of one of the surviving candidates from his Project Wesker, Alex Wesker. So as a quick summary, Alex Wesker was only one of the two who was able to survive the rigors of Project Wesker. Though unlike her candidate brother Albert, who was able to assimilate and use the experimental dose of the Progenitor virus and gain superhuman abilities, Alex on the other hand became severely ill and was bound to death in an early age. So like Spencer, she too only had a limited amount of time, and Spencer would have her try to circumvent death by using a new variant of the virus. Which in Resident Evil Revelations 2, we find out that Alex Wesker was the one behind the newly developed T-Phobos virus, which like its predecessor Virulent Strain, that if one individual was to able to assimilate with this newly developed virus, one could achieve powers similar to Albert, and to Alex's point, she wanted to transcend. Well, this faith that Spencer had in Alex will be continued to be expounded upon in his later memoirs, which read, I have done everything Alex has asked of me. Alex's ingenuity far surpasses those of normal people. We wait for the appropriate time, gather the necessary materials, and Alex continues to keep the operation running smoothly. Most children are held back by the limits of their own intellect, but not so with Alex. I've never witnessed anyone so adept at absorbing the talents of others simply by observing them. I could not be more pleased. Alex displays superior qualities to everyone else. I've provided everything Alex and the other researchers would need to conduct the research: unlimited funding, top-of-the-line equipment, research materials, and an endless supply of test subjects. The only thing wanting is time. They will conduct their research on an isolated island in the South Seas that is home to an abandoned military installation from a nearby country. Alex has already gone there with a group of research assistants, research materials, and hundreds of test subjects. I waited in earnest for good tidings of the research. Instead, I received only a phone call a month later asking me to send more test subjects. How was it possible that they've gone through hundreds of test subjects in only a month? As my frustration rose, Alex attempted to reassure me. You'll be pleased to hear that all experiments are running smoothly. And so I continued to wait. Well, to Spencer's disappointment, Alex has yet to complete her research into the DeVuH virus at that point, though we see Spencer, who hardly put his full trust into her, praising her, as we can see that his realization of death is coming closer and closer the more impatient he becomes. Though the key point here also explains the funding of the research base that Alex Wesker conducted in Same Island in Resident Evil Revelations 2, explaining how she was able to afford all the necessary equipment and personnel. Though still, even with the research already being conducted to the innocent population of the island, Spencer again showing how merciless and evil he was, he could care less of the lack of results from the inhumane experimentations of the people in that island. He only cares for the news that could help him achieve his immortality or godhood. So with all that, his memoir still continues on with this. I have waited and waited. I still have no word from the island. It's been a year since they've left. I've sent thousands upon thousands of test subjects for their research. As soon as Alex makes an improvement to the virus, the team administers it to another batch of test subjects. Unfortunately, they do not have the time to study the virus before testing it. If it looks feasible, they proceed forward and see how the test subjects reacts to it. All of this is to be expected, I suppose. It's not Alex's fault. I have been impatient, true, but the situation is dire. Age has not only worn down this worthless shell, but it has also attacked my internal organs and rendered many of them virtually useless. What little functionality I can eke out of them is only thanks to the machines attached to my body. Time is a merciless enemy. I'm counting on you, Alex. Only you can give me the key to eternal life. So as his third memoir concludes, the same still continues on, Spencer's impatience and the encroaching death that he's trying to circumvent. Though the research by Alex should be done very soon, because if we played RE Revelations 2, we knew that the DeVuH virus would be somewhat of a success. But as far as we knew, Spencer would not benefit from any of the results from Alex, because in his final memoir, it reads, "Finally, a report of success. The experiment was a success. The news alone has sent a new surge of energy coursing through my veins. I feel rejuvenated. Last night's dinner even tasted sweeter. The wine more excellent. My butler Patrick is truly a culinary savant." Unfortunately, that joy was short-lived. Alex has disappeared. I would be less concerned if that were the only regrettable report from the island. The other researchers are also nowhere to be found. Neither are the thousands of test subjects, and most importantly, all the research materials, including the final virus that was to make me a god, cannot be located. I have been betrayed. I have allowed myself to be betrayed again. I should have learned from my mistakes with Albert. Now my life stands on the edge of a knife. The only person I can trust is my loyal butler, Patrick. He's my last hope in locating the virus that will cure me of this wretched ailment. But is time on my side? That is a question that preoccupies my mind, and only the god I am to become can answer that question. So now we know that Spencer would not gain any benefits from Alex's research, because Alex would also eventually lose her life on the island during Resident Evil Revelations 2, which would be from the help from the previous mainline protagonists of the series like Claire Redfield and Barry Burton. Well, to Spencer's dismay, he can only trust his butler Patrick, which he too had some recounts into the final moments of Spencer, which reads, "For a time, it appeared as if Master Spencer would recover his former health, but fate was not so kind, and now he confines himself to his study for days on end. It has been ages since I've seen him take his meal in the dining hall. I have endeavored to prepare the meals to his liking, and I bring them every day to the study. Unfortunately, he lacks the strength to eat anything but soup and other liquids. I cannot recall a time in history of this household when the situation was as dire as now. In generations past, the Spencer estate was the nexus for the most well-to-do European socialites. Now, only a skeleton staff remains to look after a man who keeps himself in a virtual seclusion at one of his many residences. My family has been in the Spencer's household service since the time of his great-grandfather. This rapid state of decline would have been unimaginable just one generation prior. I remember fondly the days of my youth, but that seems like a lifetime ago. It was about 50 years ago, back when my father was the head butler of the household. At that time, I was learning his duties in preparation to succeed him, and there was always some chore or errand that would keep me running around the house. I remember how Lord Ashford, another aristocrat from a storied family, and one of Master Spencer's schoolmates, Dr. Marcus, would find refuge from the summer heat at this villa. My father and I would accompany them and do our utmost to see that they wanted for nothing. Perhaps because I was the youngest person there, they would take to teasing me, though more often than not, they would treat me as one of them. I remember the time Lord Ashford gave me my first taste of brandy. It was on the second floor of the dining hall, behind the stone statues lining the room. I'll never forget the mellifluous scent when he opened the bottle, but those cherished times are only memories now. Lord Ashford, Dr. Marcus, and of course my father have already passed on. Only Master Spencer remains, and I'm afraid his days may be few. When Master Spencer dies, it will mark the end of his illustrious family, as well as my family's service to his. For now, I can only wait for the inevitable. I cannot stop thinking about the screams of those poor souls imprisoned in the basement. I administered the virus to all of them as per Master Spencer's instructions 1 week ago. Whatever they become now, they are no longer human. I have assisted with multiple experiments at Master Spencer's behest. I do not know of what use a simple butler not schooled in the science such as myself can be, but I should be proud that the master trusts me with this important work. He usually has nothing but contempt or distrust for those around him. However, I cannot help but feel a disconnect between how I think I should feel and my actual mental state. On the one hand, I am filled with joy at the chance to assist the master in any way I can. On the other, I feel as if I am losing a bit of my soul with each experiment I assist with. The only way I can preserve my mental faculties is by taking time off or by trying to divorce myself from all emotion. Whichever the case, I must act and not question the master. Duty and honor, that is what is at stake. For generations, my family has been in loyal service to the Spencer household. I will not betray my duties. I will serve Master Spencer until the end. I have dedicated my life to serving him, and there is no turning back on that. It is time to check on the test subjects and report on their current condition to Master Spencer. I will carry out my duties, and I will do so honorably. And finally, his final memoir would end up like this. I have been with Master Spencer's employed for the majority of my adult life. As of late, however, I find his actions to be inscrutable. For example, he has taken every possible precaution to conceal his whereabouts from the outside world. For what reason? I don't know. Then one day, he asked me to find a certain man and make him aware of Master's whereabouts. I do not know why he would go to such lengths to contact this man, but perhaps he wanted to see if someone could find him. The man in question is one Mr. Albert Wesker, a name I have not heard in quite a long time. I only met him once, and that was over 10 years ago. I am ashamed to admit that I cannot recall his face, because as head butler, it is my job to remember people. The reason I believe is because of his eyes, those cold, unfeeling eyes that completely overshadowed his other features. At any rate, I have endeavored to get the information into Wesker's hands without letting on that it was Master Spencer's desire that he have that information. I know of a certain unscrupulous individual who could put the information on the street for the right price. He is the kind that does not care who he talks to. What made the individual I found of such an importance is that he is an employee of a female spy who has regular dealings with Wesker. I paid this man, I forget if his name was Roberto or Ricardo, more than he deserved, and gave him the bare minimum of information necessary to fulfill Master Spencer's wishes. I dutifully carried out Master Spencer's direction to the letter. It was at this point that the situation took an even more cryptic turn. The master, he let me go, but I do not know why. I asked him for a reason, the only time I've ever questioned him, but he responded with only silence. I do not know what to do now. I am filled with a sense of loss. Everything I've ever known is gone. I dedicated my entire life to serving the Spencer household. And now, that book has been forcibly closed for no apparent reason. The only ones who remain will be those untrustworthy security guards and the people imprisoned below the premises. I truly doubt the guard's ability to attend to all of Master Spencer's needs. Could it be that he plans on dying? No, he's not that type of man. He would not want to leave all of his affairs in such an unfinished state. Master Spencer must have some grand machination at work that are beyond my ability to comprehend. At any rate, I can only obey his wishes and take my leave. I will be loyal until the end, even if it breaks my heart to do so. So upon reading that, it perfectly summarizes what was going on with Spencer from his butler's perspective, and that Spencer only trusted a handful of individuals, and how he spent the remaining time of his life plotting in the background in isolation. But in his butler's memoirs, there were key points that were mentioned that it was actually Spencer who wanted to reach out to Albert Wesker after Alexis Wesker's research fumbled, which some familiar characters being referenced like Ricardo from RE5 and Ada Wong, the lady in the red dress and the longtime associate of Albert Wesker. But this last chance of contact with Albert Wesker would be the final mistake that Spencer would commit, because he would eventually lose his life to the last surviving member of Project Wesker, which even still at this moment saw himself with such grandiose and mentality of godhood. But in the end, after going through so much, Spencer's work of trying to achieve his goals cost so many lives, not only from the countless research into the Progenitor virus, but also the collateral effects of the infection being spread around the globe, which this aspect truly shows how evil this man was, lacking any kind of remorse or empathy to those around him, only caring about the results from the inhuman research that he funded, and also trying to pull strings in the background that would affect countless lives that we've seen in the series, all for the sake of his goals of eugenics and godhood. So as the last point, I found it ironic that he deviated from working with Mother Miranda and using the Megamycete as a tool for the future he wanted to have, because as we know from Resident Evil Village, Mother Miranda became the immortal-like being that Spencer was trying to achieve, where she still retained her youth and was able to control the mold and showed many different kinds of powers using the Megamycete. If only Spencer would have stayed in the village with Mother Miranda, he could have possibly achieved his goals of godhood, and the discovery and research into the Progenitor virus could have been completely avoided, saving many lives in the process. Though with this evil man's nature, if he was somehow able to harness the Megamycete to its fullest potential, who knows what kind of terror he would have spread in the Resident Evil timeline. Anyways, what did you guys think about Oswell E. Spencer, and where would you rank him compared to some of the most evil characters in the gaming industry? Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Also, if you guys enjoyed this first episode of Explaining Evil, then please let me know in the comment section below on which character I should cover next. And it doesn't particularly have to be a Resident Evil character as well. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, you guys have a great rest of your day, and this is Hey DeVuH, and I'll see you guys on the next video.